between Sophia and Sophia. Welcome to Lib and Let Die with me, Lembit Opik, and
me, Mark Oaten. Why did you have two welcomes, Lembit?
Because I'm very pleased to see people. One welcome is to the viewers, and the other is to you.
Oh, that's lovely, heartwarming. It's going to be downhill from now onward, though, I can imagine. But welcome to you, Lembit. What have you been up to? How's life?
Oh, I've been having a laugh, also known as the Labour Party conference. I wasn't there, but I loved it. I hope we get to talk about that today. The station's going well, I have to say. I always sound like I'm propagandizing when I say it, but I'm just rushed off my feet. It's great whenever I go places. Oh, Lembit, what are you doing now? They say sympathetically. Those old stagers who are still in Parliament long after we left. I say, I run a TV station. They go, of course you do. Yeah. Where can I see it? And I say, here. And they go, oh. Wah, wah, wah. What about you? I see you've just gone a lot grey and you're still doing the same old job you did 30 years ago. That's what I say to them. But I think it, I don't say it. What about you?
I'm good. I went to Venice and Verona and Lake Garda last week, and it was just really relaxing. Went with a group of friends, and I'd never ever been on a gondola before. And I know it's incredibly cheesy, but went on a gondola and did not sing just one.
Oh, you had to do it, didn't you?
Not doing it. Absolutely awful. You could just see other people doing it. You could see the gondoliers. What are they called? The pushers? I don't know. You could see them cringing.
Pushers is something else. No,
actually, you're so wrong. In Cambridge, and I know about this because I researched it. In Cambridge, the people that do the punting are not punters. They're called pushers. There you go.
Okay. I was going to make a different joke, but it's too late now. If you'd been there with one person, it could have been the two gentlemen of Verona.
Yes, that's true. I did go with my husband, but there were other people crashing the party as well. But talking of
it's a Shakespeare play, if you don't know what we're talking about, folks, by the way.
Well, indeed. And actually, in Verona, you have allegedly the balcony where Romeo and Juliet did that. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? Lembit, wherefore art thou, Lembit? What do you want to talk about this week?
That couldn't happen now, because with health and safety regs, you'd have to have a perspex glass. Everyone would have been safe. Would have spoilt the play.
Absolutely.
No such safety net for that Labour Party conference I mentioned. Love to talk about that.
And
a crash and burn.
I mean, it's been conferences all round. You and I probably have got a load of conference stories. I remember, the conference bar, they used to say at the Lib Dem conference, that was the biggest takings behind the bar of all of the three-party conferences. As Lib Dems, we may not have been in power, but we were power drinkers. The gossip, the intrigue, the jumping in and out of people's bedrooms that went on at conference, it was nobody's business, I have to tell you. But we should talk seriously about the Lib Dem conference. And I think at the same time, a little bit later on, I'd love to say, I'm sure you would as well, a few words about dear old Ming Campbell, who sadly passed away.
Yes, Ming Campbell, former leader of the Lib Dems. Not a very successful leader, but a very decent gent. And I can tell you the last time I spoke with him, I vividly remember it, actually. And it was actually the best conversation I ever had with him. We'll come back to that as well. And I suppose we're going to have to do your TV thing.
We're doing my TV thing, and I've got a cracker this week, which I have a very, very big vested interest in. It's a program which talks about, in part, how my life came crashing down. There's the teaser.
Really?
Yes, really.
I made a TV appearance this week, but that will be relevant to one of the stories. Let's start, though, with the Labour Party conference. Now, if you're watching this in the archive, you'll be able to see whether our analysis, our debrief is accurate or not. But this is shortly after the Labour Party conference finished. That's when we're filming this. And I have to say it was a road crash. I just watched banal speech after banal speech with the ever wobbly David Lammy waiting in the wings to drop his clanger, which I thought he wasn't going to do, but we'll come to that in a minute. Then Keir Starmer, who's got some sort of a anti-bromance going on with, you know who?
I mean, he mentioned him, I think, 4 times in this speech. To be fair, Ed Davey, a few days before, mentioned him 40 times in his speech. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We're talking about the Labour Party conference here. And look, at the end of the day, the most important thing was whether Keir Starmer could knock on the head all of these leadership rumors. Andy Burnham was the star of the conference in the first few days, even though he had no official platform. Everybody was talking about, is Andy Burnham going to be able to mount a challenge? Had he peaked too soon? And so all of the attention was on whether Keir Starmer could actually settle some of the nerves in the room and deliver a decent speech. And look, Lembit, I have to say, from a man who has no charisma, no ability to give a rabble-rousing speech, it was by far Keir Starmer's best speech. The bench, of course, is not high on that. The bar's not high. But he did, I thought, in the end, a decent job.
I just couldn't disagree with you more. I'm not disagreeing just for the sake of disagreeing. I watched the thing. I actually scheduled my day around his speech, and I would summarize it in one word: boring. It was vague. It was non-committal. It was whingy, obsessed with Nigel Farage. And it said one of the most idiotic things I've ever heard him claim, that Nigel Farage doesn't like Britain. I mean, come on. He doesn't like Britain. How can anyone, even his enemies, think that? I mean, if you want me to think it was a good speech, you now have to explain to me why someone who ludicrously pretends that Nigel Farage doesn't like Britain is credible.
Look, it was a good speech for 2 or 3 reasons. As I say, the bar is very low, but he was able, at least, to raise his voice at the right point and to actually reach the end of a sentence so it gave clear instructions to the audience when to clap. So in very basic delivery terms of giving a speech, he was able to do that. Unfortunately, his eyes kept continually looking at this full screens and the auto cues, so it still looked a little bit wooden. But what he did do was to take on reform. And now this is a really interesting strategy, because the Lib Dems a few days before, and we'll come on to talk about that, and then Labour in this conference have both decided, look, the elephant is in the room. You've got to talk about it. You've got to actually take it straight on. And I think it's a clever strategy. And so that's why I actually thought that taking on reform in that way, and that very, very good couple of sentences where he talked about his pride in Britain being different from Farage's pride in Britain, how he talked about the fact that you've got genuine people who are living in this country from different color. I thought that was quite moving, and I thought that he brought together the conference around those themes. And a final thing I would say is, look, in part, this was a conference speech to keep people calm in that hall in Liverpool, and in part, it was to try and reassure the public that he has some ambitions for the future. I think it was more successful as an internal exercise in the Labour Party than it was an external exercise to the general public.
Well, I agree with you in the last point, but remember that Margaret Thatcher had endless standing ovations in her final speech before she was chucked out. The fact is, I'll tell you why. You've been specific, I'll be specific. I'll tell you why I thought it was a rubbish speech. Number one, he gave tons of airtime to Nigel Farage, saying, having already said, he said Nigel Farage was the enemy, or Reform UK was the enemy. He said that the policies were racist. Nigel Farage doesn't like Britain. These things are completely implausible. Then the other thing he did, he went on in this rambling way about all the achievements of the Labour Party. Basic rule. You said yourself you don't spend that much time making charismatic, heavy-duty speeches. I think you are a pretty good speaker. But you know as well as I do, if you have to tell the public how good the world is, it's not. And then the final point is, oh, there she is now. We got Rachel Reeves. He's talking her up about how the economy is very important to us and we're going to make a difference. Everybody knows he's completely trashed the economic agenda. We've got unexpectedly high borrowing, unexpectedly high taxes, unexpectedly high interest rates. And even though interest rates have gone down, they're still pretty high, and unexpectedly low growth.
I
How
agree.
can you think that he made a good job of it? If he'd been contrite, saying, "Look, it hasn't gone as well as we intended. Please stick with us," I would have been more sympathetic.
Well, look, I agree to the extent that the first year has been an absolute disaster. I was just judging on his ability to deliver a speech to conference. But if you want me to give a judgment on the first year, then I'm with you. It has been disastrous. What I think he did was also miss an opportunity to have some major, exciting policy announcements in the speech. What's the point if you're going to get rid of the two-child cap on benefits? What on earth is the point about hinting and leaking it? You might as well say the damn thing in the speech and get some headlines around that. So I think he missed some opportunities to come up with 2 or 3 major policy announcements. Instead, he's going to let these be delivered by Rachel Reeves in the budget. Well, frankly, he should have done it now, and it would have gone down very well in the conference hall and probably with the wider public, and it would have meant those would have got the headlines. So he missed opportunities there for sure.
Let's just talk about. So, okay, marks out of 10. Then I would give Starmer's speech a 3 out of 10 because he got the words right and he didn't call hostages sausages.
Yes, okay, fair enough. Well, that's at least an improvement. So on the basis that it's an improvement, and on the basis that he was able to get the conference behind him, I'll give him a 6.5 out of 10.
6 out of 10.
6 out of 10.
I hope the viewers think you're joking.
No, I'm not. I've given my reasons why. But look, let's move on to the other conference which happened in the last week or so, and that was the conference of the Lib Dems down in Bournemouth. Always sunny in Bournemouth, always puts the journalists in a good mood. I always used to find at Lib Dem conferences, because it was the first of the major conferences, everybody was relatively excited. They were not hungover completely. They were in a good mood. It got off to a terrible start. I mean, look at these images now. This was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And Ed's got a slightly bigger stomach than I've got now as well, from the looks of things. Really, Ed, this was a very poor start to the conference. And I hear there was some mutterings amongst the MPs to say, look, these kind of stunts are not doing us any favors. I think they had a place perhaps during the election campaign. I think now their time has gone. What was good was the end of the conference, where I think that Ed made one of his best speeches. And again, he focused on reform. The difficulty I have is that if Ed wants to be seen as the main challengers to reform, he wants to say it's about a liberal England or a reform England, then he has to be more statesmanlike in doing that. And that means those stunts have to stop.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. First of all, for once, you and I violently agree about the embarrassing entree. That's a think of meal. But entry. That's the simple word I'm looking for. The embarrassing entry of Ed Davey onto the stage there with a brass band. What's he trying to say? And the way he looks, he just doesn't look right. He just doesn't look right. And it's almost like he's completely oblivious to how idiotic he's coming across. The only person equally idiotic to that is, David Lammy, I think. Maybe we'll talk about what he said about Farage a bit later on. But the problem with Ed Davey is all we're really looking at is stunts. Now, the Lib Dems did get quite a lot of coverage, I have to say. I'll give them that, quite a lot of coverage. But did they really deserve it? Because I'm no wiser about what a Lib Dem government would do now than before. Ironically, there are people who are now saying Lib Dems are going to be the official opposition.
And the polling is suggesting that could indeed be the case. But look, what you did get was this wrapping of the flag, this re-ownership of the flag, which I thought was very clever from the Lib Dems, and interestingly, something which Labour followed. I want to make 2 points before we come back to reform, because the fascinating thing is that reform have dominated the conference season, even when it's not their conference. But I think there is a clever piece of work being done by certainly the Lib Dems, saying that we are going to be the main opposition to reform, and Labour doing the same thing. The real party that's suffering from this is the Conservative Party. Nobody's talking about them. And so the way the Lib Dems are positioning themselves as being, look, us or reform, really helps in so many of those seats where it's the Lib Dems and the Tories who are challengers. Because by constantly talking about reform, both the two parties, Labour and the Lib Dem, are increasingly sidelining the Conservatives. And that's going to have an interesting consequence. But what I want your views on is whether or not Farage is right to now criticize and say that the attacks on reform are actually putting him in danger, because that's been one of the things that Farage has. I think we've got a clip here of Farage saying just that.
I am now, as a result of this week and the abuse that has been heaped upon our supporters and our voters, more determined than ever. Don't underestimate that.
That is, I think he really means it. That is heartfelt. I was with Nigel Farage a few weeks ago, and he was showing largesse. He's handling his authority and his political celebrity now with a great deal more aplomb, a lot more statesman-like mindset than he did before, because he knows he's likely to be the next prime minister. But when you have someone like David Lammy suggesting that Nigel Farage had a flirtation with Hitler Youth, look at that man. It's just, he's a disgrace. And 3 hours later, he always looks like he doesn't have a clue what he's doing. 3 hours later, he had to retract the comment. Now, I have to say that with Labour having a go at Farage, with Ed Davey having a go at Farage, Lib Dems, with David Lammy saying that Nigel Farage flirted with Hitler Youth, that is beyond the pale. Nigel Farage is essentially the acting prime minister. Everyone's waving those British flags, like you said. Everyone's trying to be ultra patriotic. But for Lammy to say that, think about it this way. There's something called the Public Order Act 1986. And 4A says if you say things which can cause distress, fear, or harassment, then that's an offence. Why has he not been arrested, given that Lucy Connolly went to prison for over a year for hurty words on the internet that she took down 4 hours later? He had to retract 3 hours later. Lucy Connolly never made those comments live on the BBC. David Lammy did.
I think this is a really, really, really sensitive time in British politics, because reform have upped the ante. We've got flags on posts all around the UK. Tensions are running high. And the 2 or 3 opposition parties to reform don't quite know how to handle it. What I think you've seen this week is a first step towards them understanding how to take on reform. You've got to address it. You've got to take it on. And they're fighting now amongst themselves, Lib Dem, Labour, and I'm sure we'll hear it from the Conservatives. All 3 of them want to be seen to be the main challengers to reform. But there are going to be clumsy statements made like the one that David Lammy made. But it's a fascinating moment. And, you know, we're going to have to watch carefully. I think there's also something that Angela Jenkins was saying about how she is reacting.
It's actually made Nigel and reform. It's like being recharged, isn't it? Because it's focused our minds even more of. It's not only got personal, but it's got personal for our supporters and reform voters as well, because they are dissing every one of them. They're dissing the former Labour Party members who's come over, and we are going to beat them. We are. Come the next general election, there'll be very little left of the Conservative, also the Labour Party, because they've both let down the British public. And the thing is, as we've seen, it feels like the Labour Party have got a hatred of people who don't think their way, which is obviously the British public. So we will come back fighting. We are fighting.
I mean, I don't know what you think, Lembit, but if you were advising the Lib Dems or Labour or indeed the Conservatives, what would the advice be? So far, I think it has been to slightly ignore reform. Now the advice appears to be to take them on. But in doing so, of course, you are giving them the oxygen of publicity. It's a really tricky dilemma. I'd
say the Conservatives change the leader, though I don't think that'll save them. I think that's like changing the captain of the Titanic after you've hit the iceberg. I'd say to the Lib Dems, stop Ed Davey looking like a clown. Just shut up, do your work in your constituencies, and win by default, and you might get to be the opposition. And to the Labour Party, to Keir Starmer, I say, the only way you will now be able to show that you're a British patriot is by voting Reform UK, Keir.
Yeah. Well, look, one person I think we can both agree on who was not a clown, able to lead a political party extremely well, was Ming Campbell, who sadly passed away this last few days. You and I both knew Ming. We both worked with him when we were in Parliament. From my perspective, I found Ming to be a remarkable person. He was so calm, never lost his temper. He was just decent. He was a gentleman. He had that great ability of some politicians to also have a life outside of politics, and that was really important. He loved his sport. He'd been an Olympic runner. He had an incredible marriage with Elizabeth, and I just found him to be a wise counsel as well, and very brave. Also, when he had cancer, when he was in the parliamentary party, I remember him turning up to Parliament, even though he was clearly very, very unwell indeed. So yeah, many fond memories of Ming, but I know, Lembit, you'll have your own as well.
A couple of thoughts. One thing I didn't like was when he stabbed Charles Kennedy's political career in the back. I felt that the party needed to coalesce behind him, behind Charles Kennedy, and Charles should have been able to say, look, I have a problem with an addiction. I want to work through this with the country because maybe it will give other people hope. And he should say, and Ming Campbell should have said, this is like an illness like any other, because Charles and Ming were quite close. And I felt that Charles was he wasn't a bitter person. I felt he was betrayed by Ming to an extent. But
it could have been, we can rewrite that history. We were both incredibly closely involved in those months leading up to Charles's resignation. It could have been possible. One narrative would have been, look, Charles making that kind of public statement and saying, I need 6 months away from frontline politics, and Ming is going to step in as an interim leader for me while I sort my life out. I think that would have been very, very brave. But, you know, for Charles, that public acknowledgement was something which he really struggled with as well. So I don't think that would have been an option. But look, that's in the past. I want to remember the good parts of Ming.
That said, the last time I met Ming was in an airport lounge at Heathrow Airport. He was on his way back up to Scotland. I can't remember. I think I was going somewhere into Europe. And we sat down, and this was maybe a year and a half ago now. And we talked. We probably talked for about 45 minutes. And it was the best conversation I ever had with him, because we were both looking back, and we talked about Charles Kennedy as well. And this is the second part I was going to say. Having had that conversation with him, it caused me to revise my views of what he'd said before. That time, all those decades ago now, because I think what Ming Campbell was really saying was in sorrow, not anger. He wanted Charles to get better, but I guess he'd had to live with that a lot as a Scottish MP, and I think he was weary of it. But the conversation I had with him was generous, it was unpretentious, it was honest. And when he walked away, I felt that I had been sitting with a great statesman. And it's a fond memory. Now, he didn't die in tragic circumstances. He's lived to a good old age there. But once again, he's one of the big beasts, and we just don't have people with that sort of gravitas anymore. I
agree. I mean, I reflected in a couple of the tributes I did to him on the fact that we have up there in heaven, if you believe in that, Charles Kennedy, Paddy Ashdown, and now Ming Campbell, 3 giants of the Liberal and the Liberal Democrats. And the 3 of them will be keeping an eye on the party. They'll be making sure that liberalism still stays strong. But it's a tragic demonstration of losing such incredible individuals. I'll add Shirley Williams into that. You know, we've lost a lot of our grand statesmen in the party over the last 4 or 5 years. But look, I want to reflect on one other thing about Ming Campbell, and it links to my television program that I'm going to choose, and it links to a very important message I never got from Ming, but we'll come on to that. I think now is probably a good time to take a short break. We'll be back with a discussion which could get really lively on ID cards, and of course my favorite part of the whole week, our favorite TV programs and films. We'll see you after the break.
Hello, I'm Basil Valentine, and this is Unprecedented TV, unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented, the home of free speech here on the internet. Do please like and subscribe over at YouTube. Follow us on X, and remember, I'm on air every day, Monday to Friday, 1 p.m. for Ascending Order, your daily news edit with live guests and all the genuinely most important stories from around the world. Don't allow yourself to be propagandized by the corporate media. Forget the world at one on Radio 4. Join me, Basil Valentine, instead, 1 p.m. on X, Monday to Friday, also on YouTube. And I'll see you all very soon.
Welcome back. Back in Parliament, maybe 20 years ago, there was a proposal by the then Labour government under Blair to introduce ID cards. And I was Shadow Home Secretary at the time, and I helped, along with David Davis, the Conservatives, to lead the campaign to stop ID cards. I thought then that they would just simply not work. The biometrics were complicated. We had something, Lembit, called farmer's thumb, which meant that if you were a labourer or you'd been doing lots of gardening, the actual prints on your thumb wouldn't work on the biometrics. They wanted to charge everybody £100 to get their ID card and send people off around the country to processing centres to do it. So I argued against it then, more so on practical grounds than on civil liberties. But now it's back. And it's the Labour government again talking about it. Keir Starmer this time saying ID cards should be introduced. And the reason he's giving is to tackle illegal working in this country. I know where I stand now on it, and it may surprise you. But Lembit, where are you?
Our viewers got in touch and wanted us to ask. Wanted us to ask you if you really believe that those profiting from human trafficking will think, oh dear, I have to check your digital ID now. I can't carry on paying you £1.50 an hour to work in my sweatshop.
I'm absolutely convinced that amongst the reasons that people travel through France, which is a safe country, to come to the United Kingdom, amongst the reasons is because it's easier to work in our illegal economy than it is in other countries. And we have to deal with that.
Bosses who are prepared to hire people illegally are not asking them for their national insurance card. So what's the evidence? What makes you think they're suddenly going to ask them for a digital ID?
We need to be really clear. You must have ID, mandatory digital ID, in order to work, because we have to stop illegal working. If you look at any of the raids, we've massively increased the number of raids on working premises. It is absolutely clear that people are working illegally in numbers.
But why do you think that them having a digital ID, having to have a digital ID, would stop that problem, when right now people are meant to have a national insurance number and card, and if they're not asked for that, a boss is willing already to break the rules? What's the difference going to be? Well,
the difference is this is on point of starting, not a retrospective exercise as it now is. It is an automatic collection of the information by the government, so we know exactly who is working in our economy, and it will help us enforce the rules that are there. But there's no point people saying to me, why do we need it, when we all acknowledge there is a problem. People are working illegally in our economy.
That's like leaving aside the fact that Keir Starmer deliberately interrupted me when I was trying to answer your question. He didn't answer hers. Here's the problem. It's just unbelievable. We've got a prime minister who is so limited in his intellectual capabilities that he doesn't understand if you're paying a couple of quid an hour cash in hand to an illegal migrant who shouldn't be working in the first place, they're probably not going to say, but before we carry on, let me check your digital ID. Other point, he says it'll be checked automatically. Oh, so what's going to happen now? Hey, Mr. Illegal Employer, could we just make sure your systems automatically inform us if your illegal employment involves illegal immigrants who are working illegally, cash in hand, without paying any tax? This is just craziness. Craziness. If you come across the channel in a boat, you risk your life, you throw your passport in the sea for the fish. It's the first thing you're going to do when you get off at Beachy Head. is think, oh, I better get my digital ID. No, no, no. I want my 4-star hotel, my mobile phone, my 3 meals a day, and I'll go and harass the local people in the square.
Well, look, I agree with you that ID cards are not the solution to the black marketing working. And this is the nonsense reason he's putting forward. And he's made a real error of judgment, in my view, because I have, Lembit, changed my mind on ID cards. I actually think it's a good idea. Nothing to do with immigration. Just simply, he should be arguing for it on the basis that it will make our lives simpler. And that's what I want. Because, Lembit, do you have an app for your doctor? Yes or no?
I don't know. I don't use one.
How do you do your tax returns? Online? Yes or no?
I have done before.
Do you bank online?
Mainly, yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that probably on this, I have 7 or 8 quite important things about my NHS data, my tax data, my banking data, all of these different things. And it's a bloody nightmare having 7 or 8 different passwords, different apps, different ways in which my identity is being stored. That troubles me more than having it all in one place. Now, you could say, okay, all your eggs in one basket makes it more of a risk. I would actually argue having it spread over so many different platforms is actually more of a risk. I want a simpler life. I am happy to have a digital life. That's why I now support it. I think the technology can support it. But the idea that it has anything to do with immigration is, I agree, a nonsense.
Well, now, I think what you're saying is...
I've lost my marbles. Go on, Lembit. I've lost my marbles, have I?
Well, you've lost your marbles, mate. That's my idea. That's my line. I'll tell you why I think you've lost your marbles. Because you just want to give all of your data to the criminals in one go. Governments are absolutely notoriously bad at looking after our data, protecting our data. Almost as soon as you give it to them, they sit there saying, hey, hackers, come and have a go at this. Every week, we've got some new hacking scandal. The government couldn't even keep the names of those Afghan people who were in danger of their lives secret. That was all blurted out. What chance does little Mark Oaten have? All your data won't be given, and they only have to hack in once to get the lot. Now, in Estonia, where my parents came from, they actually have made it work.
They have it in Estonia.
Go on.
I understood that Estonia is one of the examples where ID cards actually works, but you know more about Estonia than I do. Is that, is that true? I mean, that's. I understand that basically most of mainland Europe has ID cards. I've just come back from China, Shanghai, where everybody was using their ID cards to access absolutely everything. Maybe a bad example because the state is probably accessing it as well. So it's commonplace. What makes this country special that it shouldn't have them? What makes this country so bad with managing data that they shouldn't happen? Tell me about it.
Doesn't really matter why. The fact is, it happens, right? 2.7 million people at time of broadcast of filming this says do not introduce digital ID cards. So millions of people aren't going to comply. But I guess there are 3 reasons, actually, if you really want me to be specific. Number 1, millions of people simply say no. It's like Thatcher's poll tax. We will not do it. Brought Thatcher down. So they won't comply. If people don't comply, even in small numbers, then why would the migrants comply? If a third of the population who's legitimately working says you can stuff that where the sun doesn't shine, then the migrants can just ride that wave. Second point, this country, whatever reason, for whatever reason, is absolutely abysmal at looking after our data. Leak after leak after leak. Oh, sorry, terribly sorry, lessons will be learned, won't happen again. Well, it does happen again, and lessons aren't learned. And here's the third one, the privacy. How on earth can you possibly trust an authoritarian government like the one we got now with all that data? Why do you want them to know? They say, oh, that Mark Oaten's having a third stake this week. Well, you can't allow that because he's podgy now, because you know that because we know his health details. And also, he spent too much money on stuff which is high in carbon dioxide emissions. So next time he goes into the shop, he won't be able to use his card because we know that he eats too much steak.
Lembit, I mean, first of all, how did you know all of that? Have you been accessing my machine already? But look, My Tesco club card tells everybody that anyway, and other supermarkets are, of course, available.
Yeah, but Tesco doesn't tell the government. You're begging the government to know all this.
My NHS card tells me that I've got high cholesterol. There you go. I mean, look, there is so much data and information out there.
So you're going to tell the government, right, you got high cholesterol. So the government says, oh, he's going to be pricey. He's going to cost us a lot of money with all his cholesterol disorders. Okay, let's just put something in there. Do not nil buy mouth with high cholesterol products. Can't buy them anymore. Job done.
For goodness sake. I mean, that is such a ridiculous conspiracy theory. Okay, let's take COVID, for example. The whole nation there had to be able to demonstrate whether it had had its injections or not. The world didn't collapse because of that. We had our passes. We showed it worked.
It didn't work. It was the biggest outrageous money-wasting scandal of all time.
Oh, for goodness sake! Now
the pandemic.
You've lost your marbles. Did you have the injection?
Yeah, and I bitterly regret the third one because it really messed me up. I had the disease, which that created the miracle of immunity. After billions of years of evolution, I was as immune as I was ever going to be to that disease. But oh no, the government had to put all this muck into my body as if that's going to help. How could man-made muck be better than nature's miracle cure?
You're sounding like Donald Trump and you have to take bleach to stop COVID. Come on. The one thing that this government got right ahead of many others, in my view, was the rollout of that vaccination.
It wasn't this government, it was the last government. The Tories did
that. The Boris Johnson government, to be fair, the one thing he got right was that purchasing of vaccination and getting that rolled out. It was a national.
He didn't follow his own instructions. He lost his job because he was saying, do not do anything. Do not risk your granny's life. And then he's having parties. He's having parties. And then, and the great Keir Starmer, today's Prime Minister, forgot that he was having some kind of a get-together with Angela Rayner and the others in Durham. It doesn't matter why they did it. By the spirit of the law, and I would argue the letter, but by spirit of the law, they broke it because they were all standing in a confined space. They didn't take it seriously themselves. And these hypocrites are the ones that you want to give all your personal data to. Dream on.
They've already got it anyway via all sorts of different sources. For me, it's about making our lives simpler and easier. And I don't fear it, and I don't think that the majority of the country should fear it either. But let's see, next time we talk, let's bring up that clip of the petition and see how many more names have appeared on it. It's one to watch, but from my perspective, I've changed my mind on it. But maybe we could
more about civil liberties, to be perfectly honest with you.
Will compulsory ID cards stop the small boats?
Well, we only just heard about this evening, didn't we? So it's rather timely, your question, Ian. Keir Starmer is apparently going to set up plans tomorrow for digital ID cards. Lisa Nandy, please do tell us more.
Well, we've been thinking about, as a government, what we can do, pulling every lever at our disposal to make sure that we get a grip on the immigration chaos, that we're able to welcome people to this country who have a right to be here, and that we're able to swiftly process and return people who don't. And I think many towns around the country have got really fed up with the levels of chaos that we've seen. In my town in Wigan, we have had a couple of asylum hotels open up. We've had a lot of HMOs being bought up to rent out to asylum seekers that have made life quite difficult for the local population.
How will these digital ID cards work?
Well, one of the things that we're thinking about is whether to introduce digital ID, and we think there is some merit in this. The Prime Minister will say a bit more about this tomorrow, but we think that they offer two benefits. The first is that they'll be able to make sure that people are able to prove their right to be here, to work here legally very easily, which will then help us to deal with the illegal economy and stop people being undercut at work. But we also think there might be big benefits as well for citizens. If you think about the way that the NHS app has developed in recent years.
That's just, there you are. There you go. Lisa Nandy has utterly destroyed her credibility because we think there are two benefits. We think, right, how many billions is this country? We think it might do this. And once again, back to this ludicrous idea that an illegal immigrant will be fretting about a digital ID card before doing illegal work in the black market for illegal employees. And the second thing, well, you think that there's a benefit. I suppose she's talking to you on the second point, but come off it. They spent £12.5 billion in the then money, it's probably more like 18 billion now, failing to set up a digitalized single point of information NHS system. How on earth are they going to do it for all of these different things that you listed?
Well, look, I agree with you on the immigration point. I think that is a nonsense. It's a red herring, if that's the right phrase to use around it. But look at the situation we have with driving licenses, for example. We have to have them. Or if you turn to 60 or 65, you have to have different forms of identity to prove your age. If you want to go and vote these days, you have to take an identity card form in there. But there's a huge argument about what do you take in if you haven't got a passport or you haven't got an ID card. The whole mess and confusion about passports and access to e-gates. Look, I could go on and on and on about how muddled and confused proving our identity is, whether it's from voting to getting on a bus, proving your age, or being able to travel abroad. This needs simplifying. We have the technology now. This country is meant to be a leader in technology and AI and all of these intelligences. I think it's worth giving it a go.
But I feel you're becoming less intelligent as you're getting older, because I can't understand how you, one of the leading lights, the shadow Home Secretary for the Lib Dems, for crying out loud once, is now saying, oh no, I'm happy to give all of this data to the Home Secretary and to people like David Lammy. They'll go through it to see if I ever flirted with Hitler Youth. The problem I got with this is, from any angle, it just doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. Also,
So
you list all these other things.
What's your alternative?
Stop the migrants coming in the first place.
The migrants, the alternative to all of these other things that we have to do these days in terms of modern living.
All right, then, here's the alternative. Do it the Estonian way. Right, in Estonia, they've got digital ID, and it works. Do you know why? Because it's secure. They don't get hacks. They don't screw it up. They're not incompetent. Okay, they've got 1.3 million people, so it's a smaller group, but they make it work. Once you've got the level of assurity that the data is really confidential, as Estonia has, all right, maybe. Also, they've got a completely different mindset, because they're not authoritarians. You can say what you want in Estonia, and you don't get banged up in some prison just because somebody in the government wasn't very happy with you.
Lembit, your argument then actually is not on principle. It's on practicality. You just said that if we could get to the point in the way in which it works effectively in Estonia, then maybe. So actually, your position is not one of principle.
Let me tell you a little story.
One of being pragmatic, and that's the argument I make.
Okay, yeah. If we can have a perfect system, then I'm happy. One which isn't corrupted and isn't abused, then I'm happy with it. Estonia's got close to a perfect system. I'll give you an example. There's a police officer. He thought his wife was having an affair, and he was able to get into her data. And he was able to find that she was indeed having an affair because of phone calls. He confronted her with it. She reported him, and he served time. That was it. And there was no tolerance of that abuse of that system. And it's such a rare occasion, that's a notorious case. So the guy tried to corrupt it. In this country, let's just have a little look to see where Mark Oaten is. Let's have facial recognition at Tommy Robinson's demo. Let's have an off-the-record of the fact that Mark Oaten committed a non-crime hate speech incident. We know that. Let's arrest somebody for silent prayer outside a closed abortion clinic. This country is Orwellian. Estonia is a free country. So if you want to push it enough, if we can be as free as Estonia, as reliable in terms of our IT as Estonia, and have a mindset which genuinely values and cherishes freedom, then okay, let's do it. But it's never going to happen in this country.
Look, we can have a digital handshake at least on that, because I would love to learn so much from Estonia.
That looks wrong, but there we go.
Yeah, exactly. Well, at least it wasn't a Masonic one or anything dodgy like that. I would love to learn from Estonia. I think there's so many things we can learn from countries like that. They're fantastic. Can we, and it's slightly linked, but can we come to my favorite part of the show where we talk about our different programs? And mine,
the lightweight, superficial carbohydrate part. I'm not even sure if the team has found a link to what I've got, but we'll find out in a little while.
Probably such an obscure, nerdy thing that no one will be able to find the clip. But look, mine has been running mainstream on ITV with David Tennant, and why it's close to my heart is it's because it's called The Hack. And it is the story told of the hacking scandal of the News of the World back in the early 2000s. Some of you may or may not know, but my phone was hacked by the News of the World, and they apologized. Eventually, I was paid compensation, and the individual journalists that hacked my phone ended up going to jail, something I wouldn't have wished for. What this program shows is just how hard it was for anybody to believe that this would really taking place. And it's very, very well done, with some great acting from David Tennant. I urge you to watch it because it does tell the backside story, and it tells part of the story which not many people have talked about, and that is how the Met Police completely denied that hacking had taken place. And I remember being told by the Met, no, your phone was not hacked. I also remember 3 years later being taken into Scotland Yard and apologized as they played all of my old voicemail messages that I had never received because the hackers had accessed them and wiped them off. And one of those messages was from Ming Campbell. And when the leadership election for the party was happening, Ming actually reached out to me to see whether I would talk to him maybe about not running for leader. And I never got that message because it was hacked. And it would have made me maybe reconsider some of the political decisions I took at that point. So it's a great program. It's very factually based, and it tells a troubled story of what happened with our media, which completely was out of control at the time.
Well, you didn't get my messages. I remember I was your campaign manager, and repeatedly I said, why didn't you call me back? You said, never got the message. And
no, Lembit, that was the lie. I just didn't want to call you back, to be perfectly honest.
Well,
and
I'll tell you, I went to Scotland Yard. They had a list of my numbers. I never got anything. They just didn't bother. And you know what? Based on this, I'm going to go back and say, Mark Oaten's phone was hacked. I was his campaign manager. What are you going to do about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you should. I mean, I think there is a lot more that is still not being exposed. I think what some of the other newspapers were involved in as well was absolutely the same as the News of the World. Absolutely. And I also believe that there were people much higher up the News of the World, and I won't name them because for goodness sake, we don't want to be sued. Much, much higher up in the News of the World who 100% knew what was going on. The idea that these stories would appear in the paper and they would think they just got lucky and that's how they found the story, utter nonsense. They knew exactly what was going on.
Yeah, I remember I was talking to somebody and I could hear the third party on the phone. I could hear them listening. Another person I know was contacted by them, and they said, well, we've been hacking your conversations with Lembit. We'd like to make a statement about it. And I found that out just a few months ago. I am going to take this further. So I serve notice to the journalists. I didn't used to be litigious, but now this is going to take a very unpleasant turn for the people who did that. And I want justice because it wrecked my life. It wrecked yours, and in different ways, it was wrecking my life as well. I didn't understand how it was happening.
Yeah,
I was actually instrumental in getting justice for a lot of MPs, but sadly, the lawyer who I helped then didn't bother helping me out. I feel very bitter about the whole thing. I won't watch the hack because it'll upset me too much. Once I get justice, then I might watch it.
Yeah,
let me tell you,
it's worth watching. Let's have a. I hope you've got something lighter.
It's
more
a happy
uplifting and more humorous than the hack. Go on, then.
It's a sort of happy and nostalgic thing. I don't know if the team found it. I've made a request for this. The Who, the kids are all right. Now that is
Hello,
that
children.
is.
You know who I am. I know who you are, and we all know who the Who are.
That is it. The kids are all right. It was an incredibly good documentary. Give it really high scores. I loved the Who music, and it was this band of crazy people, really. At least three of whom had an interesting dalliance with various substances, including alcohol. And it was really it's a documentary of their time, and it was made around 79 or something like that, 78. The Who didn't end well, in a sense. One of them, the drummer, died really just to drugs, and then another one died as well from similar circumstances. but the band was a legend. And they got into this habit of destroying everything.
Look at it now. What are
yeah.
they doing? They're just smashing.
They just used to wreck their equipment. And because of all the damage and so on, on one of their tours, it said that the net profit from the whole tour was £3.52. Yes, they'd wrecked everything. But I found it interesting. It was a late night piece of television. And I watched it, I think it was on BBC4. And I stopped what I was doing. I was doing some editing for the station. And then I just found myself watching it. Mesmerized. Roger Daltrey there.
It's a different world. I mean, I can't think of Take That suddenly smashing their machines and being rebellious. And you actually, the pop groups of today have to be squeaky clean. You know, they're not allowed to be seen taking drugs. They're not having late night parties. They're not boozing till 3 a.m. They're not smashing up their machines on the stage. It's a totally different culture now, isn't it?
It is. Well, that's what we think. But let's not whitewash the present. George Michael lost to drugs. Michael Jackson lost to drugs. That chap who fell off the balcony, I can't remember his name. So it still happens.
One Direction.
Yeah. And,
no,
so
you're absolutely right.
And then the chap from Friends. I think it still happens, but it doesn't happen very often. And it never happened very often. But this film, it was just taking us back to the 60s and 70s. And they're quite awkward. The four of them, they look like they don't really want to be interviewed particularly, and they're quite disrespectful. On one occasion, one of them just starts taking all his clothes off. He just undresses during the interview. Just does it, really. But I think the music is great. The documentary finishes with the song "Won't Get Fooled Again," one of the absolute classics. Meet the new boss, same as the old boss. Now parting on the left is parting on the right, and it brings us back to where we started. Really, I would say that we are being fooled again, and perhaps the Who's prophetic song should have been played out at the end of Keir Starmer's speech.
Well, I guess the kids were all right then, but us two old men, we're all right as well. I think, Lembit.
We are in our own funny little way. We are in our own funny little way, but I don't know. Does anybody really care what we think anymore? I mean, or is it? Are we fools to ourselves for thinking that?
We're getting more and more viewers each week, which is fantastic. It's lovely that you engage with us. We want you to engage more. Send in your comments. Disagree passionately with me on ID cards. Give Lembit a hard time for his bonkers views on all sorts of things. But we really do want you to engage. And we might, in a future program, actually start reading out some of the comments that you make about us. But from my perspective, Lembit, it's been lovely, as always, chatting to you.
Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Unprecedented TV. We have to say that. Please subscribe. Doesn't cost anything for now. And you'll find us on X as well. The more you subscribe, the more we can do. And a big thank you for that, Mark.
You said welcome, welcome. I'm going to say good night, good night.
Have a good one.